Alrighty, so let's begin here. This is our timeline. This is when we make an offer. And then this will be when you get keys or you have to give keys, okay? So we make an offer, we do price, we do terms, like closing date, days to negotiate, okay? And I will go over these when we actually, when I actually explain the contract to you. So you're either gonna make an offer, or as a seller, we are going to receive an offer, okay? So we're gonna go back and forth and negotiate all the terms. Once we come to an agreement, then we have an actual contract. So the contract is only a contract until all parties sign initial on all terms of the contract and we actually have a date, okay? So prior to this, before we even make an offer, we are also going to have you get pre-qualified, okay? Why do you need to get pre-qualified? Well, it's like going shopping without a credit card. You need to get pre-qualified in order to do that. When we make an offer, we'll also get a pre-qual letter, okay? Now, the pre-qualification is the lender getting your basic information and maybe a few documents and saying it looks like you have a very strong chance that you're going to get you're going to be able to get this loan. Now, a full approval usually doesn't happen until later in the process, okay? So, and you'll see why. So we negotiate terms including earnest money, okay? And that's negotiable. Right now we're seeing anywhere between $1,000 and $5,000, okay? So the buyer pays and it's a credit at closing, okay? And it's paid to the title company, okay? Now, this will be first credited to your down payment as a buyer, okay? Now, the other money that you're gonna have to pay is your termination option. We call it the option fee. That buys the buyer the unrestricted right to cancel during the first few days. That amount is also negotiable. Right now we're seeing anywhere between $100 and $500, just depending on the price point of the house. This is also a credit at closing, okay? Now, how long is this option period? That's also negotiable. We can see anywhere from 3 to 12 days, okay? So you're paying for the unrestricted right to terminate. You have to pay these both fees up front to the title company. And you have until the last day of that option period at 5 p.m. El Paso time to terminate if you choose to. Most people will get inspections done during this time. Now, as a buyer, you want to make sure that you get your home inspection. If there's a pool, and especially if you're a VA buyer, get a termite inspection. The fees for those just depend on how big the house is. So on the home inspection, you can see anywhere between like $250 and $400. For the pool, you're looking, I think, like at $150 to $250. And then the termite runs usually between like $80 and $110, okay? Now, the only fee in here that will be credited at closing will be the termite, and that's only if you're a VA buyer, okay? VA buyer. Now, the buyer, the seller is supposed to pay for that. So if you wind up terminating, you don't get this credit back, okay? Now, none of these are, except for the termite under a VA buyer, none of these are required. But, and they will not be a credit because they are optional. Should you get a home inspection? Absolutely, okay? So let's recap. You make an offer, we negotiate terms, we get an approval, everybody signs off, we date. Earnest money and option fee are due. You've got 3 days to turn in this money. Now, as a buyer, if you do not turn in this money within those 3 days, then the seller has a right to terminate, okay? But if you do that, then you have these days to get the inspections done, and then we negotiate repairs, okay? So lots of different ways to negotiate repairs. We can have the seller do the repairs. We can have a price reduction. We can have a credit to closing costs, okay? Or we can have the items done after closing, but a check will need to be written to the contractor, just depending on the kind of financing you do and the extent of the repairs, okay? So now, once we actually also get a contract, then you will need to do the full loan application with your lender, all right? So this is very extensive. They'll give you an estimate of closing of fees, okay? Closing fees, because there's fees associated with the loan. And then these fees, they will recap them later they'll revisit those fees when we get closer to closing. But during the full loan application, they're going to ask you everything short of a blood sample. And you're going to feel like it's very intrusive. It's very normal. So during the loan application, they're going to ask for your W-2s if you're that kind of employee, 2 years of tax returns, and they're going to ask for 2 months of mortgage statements, okay? And then they're probably, if there's child support or any other kind of stuff, they'll copies of any other legal documents. The lender will also at some point need you to get home insurance, and then they'll also ask for a copy of a survey if there's an existing one. Otherwise, we'll need to order one. And then they'll get a copy of the title policy, okay? Or the title commitment to see if there's any liens against that. They're going to have to collect all of these things, and then all of this stuff goes to the loan processor, okay? Now, the loan processor puts together a package, okay? A full package to turn over to the underwriter, okay? Now, this entire process usually takes about anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks, just depending on the type of loan you're getting. Underwriter, okay? The underwriter is the last guy to give you the final approval, okay? Now, during this process, they're going to be asking you for a lot of information. Just keep that in mind, and this will happen right after we get a contract. So they'll be working in the background with you on that, and then I'll be working with you to get the repairs negotiated. And once we get past that hurdle, then the appraisal order gets put in, okay? And this is by the lender, okay? Now, the appraisal order, you're expecting probably about 2 weeks, give or take, depending on how busy or how hard it is to get an appraiser assigned to the property. And this is something that the buyer pays for, okay? Buyer pays because it's associated with getting the loan, and that will also be a credit at closing. Okay, so the appraisal gets ordered. You're not going to hear a lot from me during this time because we're going to be waiting for that appraisal to come in. Once the appraisal comes in and everything is good, then at that point, the lender will go ahead and send the documents for a clear to close. That means that everything in the file has been collected, and the file will then be ready to send to the closing department. Okay, now, if the appraisal comes in fine, then that's what the next process, those are the next steps in the process. However, if the appraisal comes in low, then we get to renegotiate, okay? Now, that means getting the seller to reduce the price, okay? Or if you really want the house and there's a big gap and you're willing to come in with the difference, and we can meet somewhere in the middle, or we can terminate, okay? Now, this only happens if it's an FHA or a VA loan. Now, what if it's conventional? Under conventional, then if we did not do an appraisal addendum, then we have to figure out how we're going to proceed, right? Now, if it's a conventional loan and I've done the market analysis up front, which I normally do anyway, I'll let you know if I feel like there's a chance that it may not appraise. If it may not appraise and we have an appraisal addendum, that also will give you the same appraisal addendum, the same protections as the FHA or VA, okay? So let's say we all figure all of this out, and then they're ready to send the package to the closing department. Now, in the event that this deal falls through here, then you have to keep in mind as the buyer, you're gonna miss out on you're not gonna get back the money for the appraisal, okay? Or the home inspections, or the option fee, okay? But you will get back your earnest money, okay? So under the Texas contracts, the buyer has the right to cancel during this time, and if the appraisal comes in short under these terms, okay? So once it goes to the closing department, then the legal documents are written up, legal docs are written, and then they send it to title. Okay, so title will get the documents, but they will also balance all the numbers for the fees that need to be paid. They have to collect from the tax office, and they need to get the exact prorations for payoff for the seller and also from the lender. Once they get all the numbers to coordinate, then they will be ready to get everybody to sign. Okay. Now, in Texas, you do not get possession of keys until you close and fund. Okay. So when you sign, that's called closing. Funding happens after you sign. Everybody signs all the original documents that are at the title company. It gets sent to the lender for approval, and the wire from the buyer is there as well as the lender's wire. Okay, once that happens, once the money hits, then we have funding. Okay, and then at that point, the buyer gets keys. Okay, so just remember, do not schedule the movers for the day you sign, especially if either party is out of town. You always want to leave a buffer. You please talk to me when you're going to schedule that, so that way we can make sure that this gets addressed and there are no issues. Okay, so just remember that this is a long process. It's not like buying a car where it's overnight. There is a lot of documentation that is required, but I will be breaking down all of these steps for you as we go through the process. And remember that a pre-approval is a pre-qualification, is not an approval. The approval happens right here. So I hope this helps. Feel free to call me if you have any questions.